to us about it. We are going to keep talking about it. Brandon is calling in from Florida. They have a question for you, Richard. Brandon, you're live on Talk Heathen. What's up?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Of course,
anytime.
Of course. You're here to question Richard, right? What do you got?
Yeah, so I actually run the official Veganism channel of YouTube, and so I'm atheist just like you guys. And as I've been exploring this path of trying to convert people to veganism, I've noticed definitely a parallel between believers and meat eaters, whereas people kind of, they have like an excuse as to, let's say, why they eat animals. And as soon as I disassemble that excuse, then they're kind of trying to come up with their next excuse. As soon as I dismantle that excuse, they're trying to come up with their next excuse. Because I'm finding like it's something that for whatever reason, they want to do it. Like they want to harm cute, defenseless little creatures, even though like you could get all the same taste pleasure from plants. It's healthier and nobody has to die. So now that I've kind of noticed that parallel, kind of brings me to everybody that I know is an atheist. I'm really puzzled because I feel like there's a certain level of hypocrisy there, where if somebody's an atheist and they want somebody else to question their beliefs and their reality and look at what's the morally correct thing to do and whatnot, I have a question: how could somebody understand all of this and still choose to harm animals unnecessarily? It's basically my question.
Do you know the difference between atheism and skepticism?
Do I know the difference between the two? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Do you know the difference between atheism and skepticism?
I mean, I feel like they're one and the same, aren't they? I mean, atheists, they're not really saying there isn't a God. They're just saying they don't.
Atheism is an answer to a single question, and it's about the belief in God. That's it. Skepticism is about...
I don't know about that, Richard. I mean, there's people who call themselves skeptics about lots of things. I don't know if that has to just be God.
No, atheism, I said, not skepticism.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said skepticism. Okay,
no, atheism is an answer to a single question. Skepticism is applying kind of skepticism to across the board, not just to the God question. I noticed in your introduction there to when you were talking about trying to to kind of convince people that they should be vegan, you did a lot of things that I wouldn't call skeptical. You poisoned the well a little bit by calling animals, you argued from emotion by calling animals cute. You poisoned the well a little bit by, I forgot what you did, but you did poison the well, but I forgot the specific example now of how you did it. If you want to kind of repeat the argument, and I'll try and pick it up again.
Okay, sure.
This is just wondering why you're not vegan.
Me,
yeah.
Well,
sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Onto that.
Oh. Hey, Brandon, if you are on speaker, we need you to go ahead and change that. I'm going to mute you real quick while you fix that, because I think your audio just pooped out there. Sorry, I was interrupting there, and also I'm playing. I feel like I have to play devil's advocate with you, Richard, when we have these conversations.
But I repeated last week. I think it's fine. No.
While we're waiting for Brandon to fix that, I'll tell you this. I think you can make comparisons to meat eaters and religious people, but you can also make comparisons to vegans and religious people. You can make comparisons to religious people to like anything. I understand why that is an analogy that could be used, and I have had frustrating conversations with people who are advocately anti-vegan, like who are adamantly anti-vegan, right? Who really reject that. And yeah, I could definitely make some comparisons there, but in this context, it can be a little slippery. It can be a little mushy. I don't know. Richard, I don't know why fully what stances you have. I do know that you at least hello, you're talking to me about it, but also you're willing to talk to callers about it. So I will grant you that. Okay, like that's a thing most people will not do. But I am curious to see if we could get to the heart of that a little bit more. Let's see if Brandon's audio is a little bit better. Brandon, I'm unmuting you now. If you could talk for a second, let's see if we can hear you better.
Hey, sorry about that. How are you there?
Yeah, we got you now. Go ahead.
Where did you guys lose me at? What was the last thing you heard me say?
Pretty much lost you at everything, honestly, if you want to start over.
Okay. So I was saying that for me, if I see like a wasp, what I would consider a not cute living being, if I see a wasp on my porch, I would go out there and save its life, because as an atheist, I'm under the understanding that everybody, whether you're an ant, a wasp, a cow, pig, or chicken, everyone only gets one life, as far as we know. So how can I rob that being of its one and only life for my own selfish reasons? Like, even if you told me beyond a shadow of a doubt that I would live a shorter life being vegan, I would still choose to do this just because I feel it's the morally correct thing to do. How can I, for all the things that would arrive somebody to be atheist, they have to be humble. They have to, really look at themselves and be brave and say they may not know everything, or they might have to accept certain things that are uncomfortable. So I feel like if somebody is willing to go through all of those mental barriers and arrive at that conclusion, that that same level of reasoning would draw them to be vegan as well. So I'm curious, Richard, like why aren't you vegan?
I'm not vegan because I don't see any moral imperative to being vegan. Regarding the example of harming wasps, I would also go and save the life of a wasp. And you know what I'd also go and save the life of, if I saw it in distress and peril, is a cow or a pig or a chicken. I would, if I saw a cow wrapped up in barbed wire, I wouldn't say, I am a meat eater, I eat meat, I eat beef especially, so I am going to go and I'm going to let that die because I don't care about the well-being of that individual creature. I wouldn't do that. I would do the best I could to try and save that particular animal's life in that circumstance. We have questions like this. We had one on the call last week where someone said, why wouldn't you just go and punch a dog? It's not comparable. I don't walk around punching things, intentionally causing physical harm to things for no reason whatsoever. I disagree with a lot of the farming processes. I know a lot of vegans don't like that. They think that's an excuse. I think we had an extensive after show on the ACD Discord last week. We went to, I think, almost to the time where the next show began, and on talking on this issue. And my stance is that we would have a much better kind of overall well-being for animals if vegans and meat eaters worked together to change farming methods, to change the way we farm, to change the way we treat animals while they're being farmed. I think it would cause it would make the price of meat go up. It would make the consumption of meat go down. I'll just finish my thought and then I'll let you jump in. I think it would make the price of meat go up. I think it would make the cost of meat come down. I think it would make the health of people eating meat better overall. And I think all of those things are good things. But that doesn't, to me, say that we must therefore all become vegan.
Well, I think, my first point I would say is if you replace any of those words, cow, pig, chicken, fish, wasp, if you replace it with human, I'm guessing you would probably instantly.
Why?
Well, I'm saying, like, why would we change the word to human? Well, just to show, I want to see if you're consistent. Like, because I'm thinking you would change everything you just said.
Why is it inconsistent? Why is it inconsistent?
Well, it's kind of like if somebody said a black life is worth less than a white life, right? If you're saying an animal life is worth less.
No, it's not like that, because black people and white people are human beings. And I appreciate human beings and I can communicate with them. And for the most part, there are exceptions, but I can communicate with human beings on the same level that I myself communicate. I can't do that with other animals. That doesn't mean I don't care about the welfare or well-being of animals while they are alive. I don't want to see undue suffering. And that, to me, is not a reason to become vegan.
Suffer? Because you
have
a problem with them suffering. I think the reason you have a problem with them suffering is because you recognize that any level of suffering is wrong and you want to minimize it. So if we can minimize it altogether and just cause no suffering at all, why not pick that option?
Why would we cause no suffering at all?
Well,
By all becoming vegan. What would happen to the animals that and I'm not talking about I'm not just kind of throwing the short term, let's get rid of all the farm animal. What would we do if we all became vegan tomorrow argument? I'm not going down that kind of route, although that is a valid argument in itself, I think. But let's say that if we're talking about reduction of suffering, let's take pigs as an example. If the vegan argument is that we should reduce suffering, and we can, we've got wild pigs, we've got farmed pigs. Now, let's say if we stop farming pigs, the number of wild pigs would go up. Because those, unless we are just advocating killing all of those animals off. Now, which has less suffering? If let's say we have a kind of ideal farm which minimizes suffering as much as we can possibly. And I know we don't have that, and that's why I think we should work together to kind of achieve those things. But let's say that we do have that, and then we have a pig in the wild. Which one of those two things has less suffering, do you think? One with shelter, one with access to medicine before it's killed for food, one that's had access to medicine, one that's got shelter, one that's, is cared for, or the one that's left in the wild, and even at the point of death, where if it's one in the wild and it's getting ripped apart by a predator, or the one that is, quickly killed for meat consumption. If we're using suffering as an argument, which one of those has less suffering?
Okay, I have several things to say to your point. Well, first, why you said if it was wild versus kept in captivity. For me, I think if everybody kind of treated it with the same outlook that I have, I mean, we could still keep things in captivity and protect them without killing them is one option. I think
that would be ideal, but I think if we're talking realistically, that's not going to happen. If we're going to keep the kind of creatures alive, it still takes the land that they're fed on. It still takes the kind of the care. It costs money, and unless there's an industry which is willing to do that for profit at the end of the day, then that's going to fall down onto charitable organizations. And that, I think, is an unrealistic standard to say, well, all these animals, well, we can just care for them all. Well, we can just care for them without killing them. Well, I don't think that would realistically happen.
I caught a little bit of the previous call, and it sounded like, I believe, Dan, you were saying that, there are vegans that are violent and those that are not. I would argue that is more plant-based, people who don't eat animals for health reasons and whatnot. Because the vegans, the whole philosophy behind veganism is causing the least amount of harm possible. So whatever the answer ends up being, if everyone tomorrow stopped eating animals, you're saying, what would we do with all these animals? Are they going to be killed?
That's not what I said. I said that was one argument you could use, but that's not the argument I was using. I was giving you a specific example of a creature in the wild, right. And I've noticed how you've actually avoided answering this to go on to something else. Because my specific question was, if we had a creature in the wild and one that was on a humane farm up until the point of death, which one suffers less? Was the specific question I asked you. And I noticed how you've strategically avoided answering that question to give a different scenario.
Okay. Well, let me answer your question. I think up until the point that they're killed, obviously the one kept in captivity would have potentially maybe a better life. However,
why potentially maybe, and why only up until the point of death?
Well, let me answer. Let me please, let me get the answer out. So, for example, if I ever capture like a spider, I caught one the other day that was in the airport, for sure going to die. So I was like, okay, I'm going to capture this, and then I'm going to take it home and release it. So when I got home, I was at the woods. I was like, I could keep this spider, and it would probably live a longer, safer life. Rather, it might get eaten in 5 minutes after I release it. But then I put myself in the shoes of the spider, and I want to be free. I'd say let the spider take its chances. That like whether it gets eaten or not. Maybe that's more nature versus if it's just kept as a slave or kept, in a plastic bottle for the rest of his life. That's what
absolutely I think, amazing, and has absolutely nothing to do with the specific question I asked you, which would suffer less, because the argument you gave initially was one of suffering. So I'm asking you a question about suffering.
Well,
which would suffer less?
If you let me get the answer out.
No, I'm trying to, but you keep changing you keep trying to change the question that I'm asking you to relate to something else. If we're talking about suffering, which is what you were talking about, which one suffers less?
I think that me personally, I don't know if I have that answer, but whoever decides that, if they came at it with the philosophy of love.
Do you know what I think, sir? I think it's difficult for you to answer because it demonstrates that the argument you're giving is a flawed argument. And at the start of this, you were talking about how meat eaters are akin to religious people with some of the arguments they give. And I noticed this is exactly you're doing the theist thing yourself. You're not answering a specific question given to you because it appears to be difficult for the thing that you want to try and demonstrate.
I'm not sure, Richard. I think he said he wasn't sure of the answer here. I want to make sure that Brandon gets his point across here too. Brandon, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. If I could just, uninterrupted for just, I don't know, a minute or so, please. I think that the first point I would make is there's nothing we get from an animal that we don't get from a plant, nutrition-wise. It's just filtered through the animal. All the protein, all the nutrition comes from plants. So knowing that, there's really no reason to eat animals. So maybe you might say taste pleasure, but if I could convince you with some delicious vegan food that you could get all the taste pleasure you want from plants and the whole thing is completely unnecessary, then I think we would both be in the same place of why would we do this? We don't need it for taste or for nutrition. So having said that, the whole philosophy behind veganism is just showing love, treating everyone as an equal, whether you're an ant or a human or whatever. So to your specific question, well, I probably don't have the answer to that, but whoever comes up with the answer, I think if they approached it from the position of the most loving answer possible, that, you know, if we replace the word pig with human, I think it's very easy to see where I'm coming from. If I said, if it was a human, would you want to be farmed and killed? No matter what life you got, at some point you'd say, I don't want to be killed. I'd better take my chances.
I'm almost certain I've already answered this question. And did you catch last week's show at all, Brandon, when we kind of had the vegan conversation on that?
Well, I haven't, and I'm sure you probably have answered it. I was just thinking, as I said earlier, that I run the official Veganism channel, and I send all my followers to your guys' channel. So I just wanted to hear them say what I say to you guys and what you guys say back. I think would be interesting for my audience. And I'll definitely check up on that previous video after this phone call.
Yeah, I think we should, because I touched on, just quickly before you go, I think I touched on the point on that last channel when you said, you know, you want to cause, you know, as little harm as possible to things. You know, I touched, and this is one of the major things which stops me thinking that veganism is a moral imperative. I've no problem with people being vegan. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people who say you shouldn't be vegan. I'm not like that. I have no problem whatsoever with people who are vegan. I think
don't you think that this issue is almost more, I feel like this is more important than almost as somebody a believer or an atheist, because that's kind of like all in your mind, but these are the actions that come as a result of what somebody believes. And it's literally a matter of life and death. If somebody believes that the Bible told them it's okay to have a literal animal holocaust, then that's what they're going to do. So I think that their actions are more important than their beliefs. And so I know you're already talking about beliefs.
I think Brandon beliefs inform actions, and this is why I advocate for. I don't believe that we should unduly go out causing harm to things for no reason. This is why I think vegans and non-vegans should work together. I think the bigger question is not whether someone is vegan or non-vegan, but I think the bigger question is, why the fuck do we allow current farming methods the way they are? And I think we'd have far more impact if we worked together. I think we'd have far more impact if we worked together as vegans and non-vegans to try and change that than if we spent time arguing about whether you should be vegan or not.
I think the moment you say that one life is more valuable than another in any context, that leads to factory farming. So the first way to undo this whole system.
Brandon, do you have children, sir?
I don't.
I do. And I can tell you absolutely that I view one life more important than another, because if anybody attempted to harm my children, that person would be in a far worse condition because of my actions than. And I'm not advocating violence here, but I see that and I believe you do too. I think if you have family, I have a dog who lives in our house, and it's safe. Everybody, I know last week we were talking about eating dog meat. He is safe. I value that dog's life more than I value someone else's dog's life because he's part of my close circle, and I think we all have that, whether we're vegan or not.
Well, hang on. Well, wait a minute. We do need to end this because we're 15 minutes in. But I want to ask one question for you, Richard. You said that you would eat dog meat, but you also said that you wouldn't let anybody harm your dog. So is there any inconsistency there? What if we found a dog on the street? Why does the dog on the street, why is it okay for me to eat that dog, but not the dog that
I don't think in the society in which we live, it is okay to do that. I was talking about.
You said you would eat dog meat, though.
Yeah, I would eat dog meat. If we had a society where we ate dogs, and they were farmed to a standard where they were, because in societies where they do eat dogs, they're not particularly cared for. In principle, I have no problem with eating dog meat. This was a question about.
It only matters if it's right or wrong to eat a dog if society says it's okay.
Yeah, I'm saying that's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm saying it matters to eat it because we can't just simply go against the laws of our land for what we consider is acceptable to do.
Yeah, we can. We do it all the time. What do you mean? I would. If it was the law of the land for me to report Jewish people to the Nazi government, I wouldn't do it. What do you mean, Richard? The law of the land doesn't determine what's right or wrong. Come on now.
Thank you.
What if it was state mandated Christianity? We have to go to church every Sunday. If we don't do it,
but we could still fight against it without having to kind of appeal to it straight away.
But the point is social norms, right, don't determine necessarily what's right or wrong, right? Just because it's the law of the land.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But I don't on the issue of eat. But that's not what we're talking about. The issue of eating meat and the kind of conversation last week was about carnism, and the reason that came up was because the kind of definition of carnism is that they would treat some creatures differently to others depending on the status. And the reason I said that was because I don't actually, in principle, I have no problem with eating things that we would classify as pets. In principle,
would you eat human if that was a social norm?
Well, not unless. Because I've already answered this question. I don't know why we have to go back there. Because humans, I can relate to on a different level. They are part of my own species.
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing conversation. We're over 15 minutes on this call. We have to let it go. Brandon, I appreciate you calling in.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys, for what you both do. Thank you so much.
No problem, Brandon.
Thank you for having me on.